My job is actually to make this podcast the best podcast episode that you've ever had.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to VUX World, the Practical Voice podcast. This week, me and Dustin are speaking to Shawn Kanungo of Silver. Silver is an agency over in Canada that are helping their enterprise digitally transform their organizations through the power of voice. Shawn is a fantastic speaker. He's a keynote speaker. He's the founder of Silver. Really, really passionate guy, really inspirational guy. And this episode is full of stories and anecdotes and insights that will definitely teach you a thing or two and have you thinking about things a little bit differently. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this is VUX World. So, without further ado, let's introduce our guest who will be providing the entertainment for the best podcast yet, Shawn Kanungo. Shawn, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, guys. Listen, before we begin, before you give the intro, there's probably a lot of people that come on your podcast that, they probably have listened to a couple episodes. I have probably listened to 90% of the episodes that you guys, that you have produced. I love the rundown. In fact, I actually like it better. Sometimes, with the guests, they're good. Don't get me wrong, but I like it when you guys are together and talking about voice and Dustin's providing his sort of technical insights and Kane, you're asking back. I like that. I like you two. I need more of you two together.
That's thank you. That's feedback. Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for that. That's really good feedback. What do you think, Dustin? I think we should do it every night. Are we going to do it now?
Yeah, you're too kind. I think we should have that at the beginning of every podcast.
Yes. Absolutely. And listen, just as also, I just want to say before we begin, because I know you guys do this at the end, but if you haven't subscribed to this podcast, there's a lot of podcasts right now that are related to voice, but they're probably not as good as this. So it would really help VUX World if you could leave a rating and review into iTunes or wherever you're listening to this. It's very important. So do that right now. Don't listen to anything else. Just do that right now.
We'll give people just a minute to hop away from what they're doing, hit that subscribe button, maybe even leave it a rating and a review, and you're back in the room. So let's dive into this. Shawn, tell us about yourself. So you're a keynote speaker. You're the founder of Silver. Is it now? Correct me. Is it Silver Drip or is it Silver? I see different things going on.
Yeah. So I'll give you the background on that. So. My name is Shawn Kanungo. I've spent the last 12 years at Deloitte. I was in their digital and innovation group out west, leading a lot of innovation initiatives. So, I'm really immersed in the technology ecosystem. What we helped to do at Deloitte was we either help organizations with exponential technologies, or we set up new innovation ventures for them, or we help organizations sort of embed innovation capabilities within their teams. I left them in January because I was so passionate, so excited about the voice space that I actually left my career to focus in this space, and I'm really excited about it. We created a company called Silver, where we're helping enterprise organizations, really adopt a voice, and it's called Silver, and the reason why it's Silver Drip .com is because to be honest with you, we couldn't get silver.com. That actually is owned by I think if you want to trade silver, like the currency, then I think they're owned by that. But one day we will hopefully get silver.com.
So it sounds like an expensive domain, that silver.com.
I haven't put in the request yet. I actually started to put in the request for the Instagram account of Silver, and that's how I started. I don't even know how much that is, let alone the domain. But we're working at it. See, the beauty of you is you got VUX.world.
Exactly.
Like that is actually that's fantastic. That's a great pickup, to be honest with you.
It's quite unusual as well. VUX, I think it's although VUX.com is taken, I kind of want that just for the bank, just for the kind of catalog. But I'll hopefully
What is VUX.com right now?
nothing. It's just sitting there.
Okay.
So yeah, it's something I need to. I shouldn't have said that. Actually, there's probably a lot of people out there now who are going to want to go and buy it and sell it on.
Actually, I'm going to go on GoDaddy right now and buy it and resell it to you guys.
So tell us a bit more about Silver then. So what kind of work are you working on at Silver, and what does it do and what is it all about?
Yeah, so there's two pieces to what Silver is all about. Number one is we help organizations really adopt voice within their digital transformation strategy, and really help them accelerate what they're doing in their organizations using voice. And the other thing is that, we also are a product development shop for ourselves, and experimenting on different types of apps. I call them apps. We're primarily working in Alexa and creating skills. But for most people who don't know anything about voice, I say apps because it's easy for them to understand. So, we're doing both. And in some of the things that we're working with organizations with from an enterprise standpoint is doing some really boring work. It's actually integrating with existing clients, things like Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics and ServiceNow and these big enterprise systems where you can actually get information more quickly. We have a wide range of clients right now that we've worked with. Like, we've just started. So, I've been fortunate enough to leverage sort of my brand and the work that I've done at Deloitte to get some of these clients. But they've been all over the map. We've worked with one real estate company where we're helping them, old investors, get information about the properties very quickly. We've helped a couple of organizations just do those sort of quick, simple system integrations. We're going to be working with a company right now to actually put it into their hotels, which will be really, really interesting because I know there's a lot of privacy concerns around that. So we're just going to be starting that process. We've been working with some really great clients. We have a pipeline of amazing clients in the works as well, and it's crazy. I can't tell you guys that. With more and more people hearing about voice, as the ecosystem grows, people are now starting to think more about the use cases of voice in their enterprise. And whether it's from a sales perspective or marketing perspective or from an IT perspective, all these use cases are coming up. And it's really remarkable. And even when I'm having conversations with people just about their digital transformation, I'm also identifying ways that you can use voice to accelerate what you're doing. And so I think people are it's such an amazing time to be in the space. It's still very, very early, but there's so much opportunity, and that's why I wanted to dive in this space and really and grow a brand in this space.
So tell us a little bit more about these enterprise clients then. Are these clients of yours approaching this from a nice to have perspective? It sounds really cool, voice is really good, let's invest a little bit of innovation or R&D money into it, see what it goes? Or are they coming straight in at the business end and being like, look, I think we can get a load of efficiencies out of this, help us kind of streamline what we do?
I think there's two pockets, and I think certain clients are going at it in different ways. For some clients, they see it as a essential for their digital transformation strategy. I'll give you an example of this. One of our clients, the real estate client, for example, they have a number of old investors where they don't want the investors actually going into their systems and understanding the details around their particular properties. And for those investors, it is actually critical for them to know the information, but they don't have the time, they don't have the skill sets to actually navigate and use a complicated system. And so a voice is actually an essential part of them actually getting the information. So I would say, for example, that use case, I think it's really important. For other clients, it's more of it's more about experimenting with this type of technology. For some clients, they understand that this is going to be a powerful, well, they think that it's going to be a powerful technology, but they just don't know how to navigate. So it's starting at the edges, starting with really small problems like, how can we start our robotic process automation invoicing process by just speaking? And people can just do that already, within their system, but they want to start to experiment to see how they could actually use this use case across their organization. So I think it's a little bit of both. And to be honest with you, I don't really know myself. Like, obviously, I'm bullish about voice, and you guys are as well. But I also don't know where this ecosystem is going to go and how far it's going to go. So I'm just going to help clients on either way, whether it's really essential or whether they just want to experiment with this technology.
And Shawn, you were talking about some clients have that just a little piece that they want to start off with.
Exactly.
If somebody was interested in adding voice, they go, voice is really cool. We know it's the future. We don't know what to do with it. And they wanted to start off with a little piece. How would you recommend that they discover where they should start?
Yeah. So part of the process is people actually don't know where they should start, how they should start. They don't even know within their organization what are some really good use cases. So in many of our clients, what we have done is we've actually been sort of a fly on the wall, like taking a design thinking ethnographic research standpoint, where we would literally follow people around for the day and just identify use cases where people are using it a lot. Obviously, as you guys know, talking to people in the space, a great use case, if you're actually using a particular use case a lot. For example, you're accessing a particular system for something a ton, or you're trying to query a particular system a lot. So, we find in certain roles, for example, within IT, you might be wanting to get into a system a ton. And that's a really great use case. And that is for example, getting into a CRM. And I'm getting really technical. And for those who've, in the audience who are not too technical, but for example, if you want to get into your CRM and update your CRM, it is onerous for business development and sales professionals to actually update their CRM. So if you can say, hey, I just met Dustin, he works at this company and we'd like to add him to our CRM and include the details, it's just a lot easier doing that. And so, although you can already type that information in, it is a little bit faster to do that through voice. It's not seamless yet, by the way. We've tried it, and the adoption has been a little bit. It's not. Yeah, I think we're still in the process of making that process better through voice. We haven't really solved it yet.
Are we in a phase, do you think, where it's interesting because all of the sort of stats and studies out there show that if you get a smart assistant at home, as in a smart speaker at home, and you use it a lot more, then you tend to use your voice assistant in other areas. So you'll tend to use your mobile more, you'll tend to use your watch more. But there was a thing that was out fairly recently, which was on about how people might feel a little bit apprehensive about speaking in public. So for me, I think it's a bit like a selfie. People used to hate having a photo taken. Now people take their own photo and post it all over the internet, like out in the open. So I think it'll get to a point where it's completely natural. But I'm particularly interested in the enterprise side from a user's perspective, the users within the organizations who are using it. Is it that the solution maybe requires a little bit of iterating to get it to a point where it's a bit more seamless, or is it? Do you think that people are a bit apprehensive about openly just speaking to technology?
100%. So, most of the people that I'm talking to, I'm in Canada, by the way, so we are not as mature potentially. In respect, comparatively to other regions. And so for many people here in Canada, like, for example, an Alexa device, they've only had it for 10 months here. Like, most people don't even have them in their homes, let alone in their office. So it's a completely foreign a thing for people to actually speak to a smart device. And, obviously people have used Siri and most people don't like Siri. And so it is a new behavior that people still have not even created yet. In the enterprise, what we have noticed is that it's still not part of the behavior in the enterprise, in business. I'd love to say that it is. It's not. And mostly because most people don't even have it in their homes yet. So it's a bit of a slow adoption. And the other piece is that it's funny because we did a use case where we put it into a particular office. And this was actually accessing a particular system. And somebody would say, "Hey, Alexa, open up the particular system," and then literally everybody in the office would stop. Like the entire office would go silent. And so it's kind of interesting if you put a device in an open environment. It's like everybody is waiting for the response, or people are trying to be polite, and it's a really weird behavior. And so for many people. And then what we've done in our trial cases is actually put it in people's offices with the door shut, and so that it's not in the office wide open so that anybody can use it. I don't know if we figured that out yet. And also there's security and privacy considerations around that, right? If you don't want particular people accessing a system, wide out in the open. No, now we haven't connected to, for example, payroll systems, but that's a huge implication. What if you could say, hey Alexa, what's Dustin's salary right now? Like, and you're doing that in the open. There's so many security and privacy implications around it. So I think the safest thing at this point is to actually keep it in an office and so that it's more of a one-on-one thing. I mean, this ecosystem, like you guys had this great podcast about all the innovations that happened like this week or last week around Amazon and the announcement that they made. I mean, there's so many things that came out of that. For example, like Whisper, right? Now you can actually be a little bit more quiet to talk with Alexa, which will be huge implications for the enterprise. I mean, if you can imagine, you have used huge, tons of people in the office, and it's so loud. I think the Whisper feature is going to be amazing. There's also hunches. So they came out with this idea that you can that it will guess certain use cases. I think the use case that they talked about was, for example, if you are going to sleep and you're talking to Alexa, they'll say, have you locked your door, or have you've left your front porch on? From an enterprise perspective, there's massive implications around that too, and providing hunches. For example, if you are starting an invoicing process and just understanding the different nuances around that particular invoice is like, do you want to send it today, or do you want to send it tomorrow, or should we? The hunches piece actually opens up complete floodgates. We haven't even thought about it yet. It's unbelievable. Not to mention, also, I'm going on a tangent, but Salesforce also came out with Einstein Voice. And they also partner with Siri, and not only is that cannibalizing, some of the market, some of the market that we want to capture around connecting Alexa with Salesforce, but there's going to be an entire ecosystem actually created around Salesforce, Einstein, Voice, Siri. Like, guys, this is. I to be honest with you, I don't know if you guys feel like this, but sometimes I feel overwhelmed because there's so much activity happening. The space is accelerating so quickly that I can't even keep up with everything that's happening.
It is. It's going completely rapidly. That's why we kind of wanted to start the rundown, is because it's just everything's happening so quickly that it's very easy to miss everything. I'm really curious from your guys' standpoint, because I know a lot of your podcast guests have been predominantly B2C or in the home. I'd love to understand from your guys' perspective, maybe this opportunities and implications when it comes to enterprise. I see you guys as experts, so I'd love to get your sort of insights around this space. For me, I think it's a little bit under the radar at the moment, I think. And I remember when we spoke to Bob Stolzberg of Voice XP, one of the things that his big kind of takeaway was, security, essentially. You know, everyone's worked with an IT department before, and IT departments are security first most of the time, you know, certainly in government. And it's kind of I think it's, on the one hand, there's a security side of things where people are a little bit apprehensive possibly, but on the other side, I think that there's another two things. One is that in general, it's very difficult to bring new ideas into a big corporation, unless it's your role to do that. You know, a grassroots kind of movement with this technology is never going to cut it, because it needs to be cross-organization, it needs to be into your core line of business systems to provide real value. And then on the other thing, I think it's a little bit about what I was mentioning around just usability and comfort and being kind of comfortable speaking to stuff out in the open whilst at work. I think that's another barrier. I don't know what your thoughts are, Dustin.
Yeah, I think, you know, the interesting thing is the B2C side always gets, whether it's in voice, whether it's in anything, that's where it gets a lot of press. That's what, you know, people talk about at the bar, etc. But then you go to San Francisco, and the Salesforce Tower is one of the largest buildings in downtown San Francisco. And so you look at that and you go, okay, whoa, this is a big deal. And so I think you're right that the Salesforce announcement is huge. And it's going to take a lot of people by surprise. If you've never worked with a sales team very closely, you have no idea just how much Salesforce has its tentacles in everything. And you can, I think, in a lot of ways, with every industry, again, you have sort of two choices. You have, you can get sort of fame and sexiness and maybe a lottery ticket at a huge payday, or you can go the B2B side where no one's going to know who you are. You're going to sort of toil every day, but you're going to make a lot of money doing it. So I think you got to choose which way you want to go.
Yeah. And I think, you know, one of the challenges that I'm having, and I'd love to hear your guys' standpoint, is actually trying to, we're trying to do two things here, right? We're trying to help organizations adopt voice, but that at the same time, people have no idea what voice is all about. And so I feel we are sort of at the point where, like when the internet started or when the smartphone just came out, where if you had an internet company and you had a particular product or service, you had to not only sell the product and service, but you'd also have to sell the internet and the promise of the internet and the future of the internet. And I think this is where we're at voice. So it's actually a very difficult thing, because, you know, I'll talk with CIOs, CEOs about voice. They'll be like, what do you mean, Siri? Like, that's the first thing that comes up. I said, no, like this technology is actually getting exponentially better. And not only are big brands adopting it, but, you know, from a B2B perspective, this is actually a way to accelerate your digital transformation. And so I'd like to talk about that a little bit more too, but this is the piece that people need to be starting to get around. How does voice actually play a part in your digital transformation?
So on that then, for the people who are listening who may be working within an organization, maybe as a designer, researcher, developer, might not necessarily be the one calling the shots, and also for people on the agency side who may well be in a position to influence decision makers. What's the sort of angle on that then? I think that's a really good analogy in terms of you've got to sell the product, offer it in terms of here's what we can actually build for you and deliver for you, but then also the concept of voice in general. What's the, for the people listening, if they're trying to win someone over, trying to convince someone of what the value is in this thing, what's the sort of typical kind of angle for you?
What I always say is that especially when it comes to business, one of the biggest challenges that we see within enterprise is that everybody is locked in their particular systems. Like you walk into an office and everybody is in a system, they're on their computer, they are, that's what people are doing. Listen, nobody went into business to be in a system. Nobody wants to start a business and say, oh, I'd love to just be in Microsoft Dynamics all day. The whole point about business is to actually connect with your customers, with your stakeholders, your partners, to make more stuff, to grow, not to be locked in their systems. What voice helps you do, in combination with other technologies, I'm not saying voice is the ticket. I'm saying voice plus things like artificial intelligence, like robotic process automation, RPA, like other things, is the gateway drug to getting your stuff done faster, so that you are actually not spending time within your systems doing copying, pasting, doing reporting, retrieving information, looking up information. This is where most of the time is spent within enterprises, and these are all the things that we should not be doing in business. This is not what we're designed to do as human beings, is to do this kind of stuff. We're here to actually, build relationships and make stuff, and that's what business is all about. And I think voice is another piece of removing the things that we don't need to do at work, and focus, doubling down on the things that actually matter. I'll give you a simple example of this. I'm really excited about the multimodal experience, combining voice with visual. I actually think that this is going to be a more powerful piece than just voice, just the voice device, in the office, because a lot of the times people within the office are sitting down, and they're sitting down with their laptop, and they have so I think having, for example, the new Echo Show that came out, which it looks absolutely beautiful. I don't have it. I have the old Echo Show. I also have an Echo Spot. Actually creating that as a second screen where you can actually access your system, access information more quickly, is going to speed up business so quickly. For example, let's say you needed to get micro learning done, and you were stuck in a particular in your training. Let's say you were stuck in, I don't know how to do this finance processing done. Well, you can say, hey, Alexa, can you get that finance processing tutorial up right away? And so it's actually happening on a second screen on your Echo Show. And again, that's just, you're not going into a system and trying to find the tutorial. It's just speed. And this is why enterprises should think about voice in their digital transformation, because it's speed. And as human beings, the one thing that I do know is that we love speed. We will push over our grandmother to get something done faster.
Tell us, just briefly, you mentioned a couple of things there in terms of combining voice with artificial intelligence and robotic process automation. We can define robotic process automation first, just in case there's anyone who doesn't know what that is. But then secondly, the follow-up question is, are you envisaging voice almost as a layer over the top of those systems that you said people are trapped into all day? Or is there something more that will end up over time either replacing those systems, or how do you see it fit in within the kind of architecture? Is it a layer over the top? Is it something deeper? What are your thoughts? But first, before that question, what is robotic process automation?
Sorry. I get kind of technical. Technical.
I appreciate that's probably a quadruple-barreled question, but we'll start with the definition and then I can rephrase it.
No worries. And listen, part of the reason why I love your podcast and the fact that you and Dustin you guys actually, this is about, you're actually interviewing people who are practitioners and tacticians, and actually talking to people about design and the actual technology. And this is why I love it. So happy to describe. Robotic process automation is just dumb bots. It's kind of, if you actually look at the spectrum of cognitive technologies, RPA, robotic process automation, is at the lower end. It's actually dumb bots automating existing processes. And so it's a little bit smarter than decision tree and automation that way. And a lot of leading organizations, a ton of organizations are just discovering it and adopting it. And I know, at Deloitte, this is probably the hottest practice for them, is actually helping organizations adopt robotic process automation, not artificial intelligence, but RPA. So that's why I bring up RPA a ton.
And is that the because I've come across similar things before, where, for example, you would almost like in something like Photoshop, where you can record a routine and then it'll, whenever you want to run the routine, it'll run that routine. Is that a similar kind of thing where you would record yourself putting this thing into that system and then that thing into that system, and then from that moment on, it would automate it itself?
Totally. I mean, there's a little bit more complexity, but it's exactly that idea. Obviously, you have to configure your processes so that can happen. It can also make a little bit smarter decisions around, for example, if there's something that gets them stuck, it will help triage into a different process. Anyways, but yes, exactly. Go to Photoshop, video record. It will automate that process even quicker. So I don't want to be so. Obviously, I'm trying to evangelize voice and the future of voice, but I'm not naive that voice is part of the tool set for a digital transformation strategy. It is not a layer that sits on top. It is part of a digital transformation strategy, just like artificial intelligence and other technologies are. Digital transformation, by the way, just to define it, is really about how do you actually reimagine your organization using digital. It's actually reimagining your business model or your customer experience or how you actually get work done internally as well. And technologies like voice is a tool set that you could use to help you with all those different things, whether it's optimizing your customer experience, whether it's making your operations internally a lot faster, whether it's changing your business model in new ways. I think it's part of the tool set to do that. Now, if you actually look at every technology today, like some of the game-changing technologies, they're just a combination, or I could say disruptive companies. They're just a combination of existing technologies. I mean, look at Uber. Uber is a beautiful combination of different technologies: GPS, marketplaces, payments, mobile, all these things coming together, creating a disruptive force known as Uber. I would say the same thing applies to voice. Voice will be if you combine it with other things, really can create some game-changing companies. And I think there's this whole movement around voice first. Listen, I'm not opposed to voice first, but I think if we actually think about how voice can combine with other technologies, like things like blockchain, like things like mobile and web and payments, now we're actually thinking about voice in a richer way. Because I think the way that a lot of people are thinking about voice today, and I think this is what's happening throughout history, is when we went from like analog to digital. For example, if you were the newspaper industry, you thought about, how do I actually put my newspaper onto the internet? And so what they literally did was like copy paste the newspaper onto the internet, right? And when you went from mobile, what a lot of people did is they put their website onto mobile. Like they just put it exactly like it. They didn't actually build a mobile experience or think about what the future of mobile could look like. I literally think that we're the same thing here with voice, where we're like, oh, how do you get an Uber? Well, we can get this faster through voice. And we're just taking the same business model, the same experience, and applying it to voice. But I think that when it comes to voice, if we combine it with other things, we still haven't even figured out what the future looks like. This is why it's the most exciting space in the world. I always tell people that the next $1 billion companies, the next $1 billion industries will be built on top of voice. I don't know. Am I too bullish, guys? Dustin, Kane, what do you guys think? Am I sounding crazy that this is going to happen?
I don't think so. I think over time, I think that's where I think we'll end up, to be honest. I think the adoption's rising, quicker than smartphones ever did. And I think that, it's just a case of the users catching up. That's kind of what it is. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff going on at the moment. And
is it quicker than smartphones? Sorry,
smart speakers are selling faster than smartphones ever did, as it stands at the moment.
I did not know that. Yeah. I thought it was a little bit slower, but. No, I'm going to use this.
Yeah. I'll dig out the source. I used it on a talk I did the other week.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So I definitely think so. I think that I'm interested in the combination of different technologies which we can kind of get into. But Dustin, what's your thoughts on a $1 billion company being built on a voice platform?
I don't know. There's a number of ways to think about it. I think if we're talking just on a voice first platform, just on Alexa, just on Google Assistant, I have a hard time seeing $1 billion company soon. Not to say it won't happen, but I don't see it happening soon. I think there's too much of a leap right now. But the way I think about voice, and Shawn, you touched on this a little bit, is voice is just a mode, right? Voice is an input or it's an output. And so the next Uber, the next Airbnb is going to have a voice component. It may not be voice only, but it's certainly going to have a voice component. And I think we're going to see where the majority of companies will have some sort of voice components, because there will be things that work better through voice, and you're going to want to free yourself of the shackles of a keyboard or a touchscreen and move to where it's easiest for the customers.
Interesting. Well, it's funny. I'll tell you this. I always tell this to people, is that the reason why I know voice is going to be a big thing is because everybody thinks it's creepy. This is why. So, like, if you think about every technology before it, if you think about the internet, a lot of people said, well, we're not going to put our credit card online, right? People said, no way we would do that. And then everybody did. And then when mobile came out, people thought, well, I don't want this thing tracking me all day. I don't want to go to the mall and this thing tracking me. And then everybody got a smartphone. And the same thing with voice. Like 90% of the time when I talk to people who are, 45 and up, they'll be like, I don't want this in my house because I don't want it listening to me, which is not. But this is I don't know where we got this idea from. And, everybody will eventually get this in their house and in their office. And that's my point. So the reason why it's creepy, I love it. And if you actually look at every technology, like Uber, to tell somebody that some random stranger is going to pick you up from your house and take you to your destination, no one would do that. Same thing with Airbnb. Oh, you're going to rent out your San Francisco apartment and like rent out your couch, like that's a great business model for a serial killer. So all these things, the reason why I know that's going to be big is because I always have these conversations that people think I'm not going to touch it. It's too creepy. I love it.
Yeah. I think we've talked about this before, Kane, but I think this also comes at a really good time, so to speak, in that people are getting wary of their mobile phones. They're getting wary of the addictive, always-on nature, the flashing lights, the notifications, all of that. And voice really is when you need it. And that's, I think, going to help the adoption as well. People are going to go, this is a technology that works for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be honest, guys, like the reason why I wanted to dive into this space was actually just seeing the behavior changes in my daughter. Like my daughter's barely 2. I mean, she just turned 2, and she like her 2 words that she uses are Google and Alexa. And she knows that device not only turns out the lights and gets us the weather and the traffic and, gets her Moana, but it actually will be the interface for everything. It will be an interface for her checking her financial data, for her health data, for all these different things. And so for me, I see the behavior change. This is the hardest thing to change in technology, is to actually get people to adopt. And we've already seen it with young people. I've seen it with my mother, who's 70 years old. Like she missed the internet revolution. She missed mobile revolution, and she uses voice 100 times a day. So this is why I think it's going to be so powerful, is that the behaviors have changed. And the people that don't know about voice and they're skeptical about voice, they probably don't have the voice in their house. And once they start moving the muscle around voice, then they will get then they will start to adopt. I have 100 Echo Spots sitting in the office right now. I'm going to send it to the top 100 CEOs in Canada just for them to try it. Because I can talk about it all day, but unless they actually try it and see how quickly they can get stuff, then we can actually start to help them actually use this stuff within their enterprise.
Yeah, and I know sort of on that note, you talked about the future and what's going to happen with voice, and Silver is trying to figure that out as well, right? You have Silver Lab and your recent hackathon.
Yeah. No, I can talk. I can talk a little bit about our hackathon. So, part of when I started this, I said, part of the thing that we want to do is actually create our own products, because we also want to be on the forefront of this technology. We also want to see, we also want to continuously experiment and get better as well. Recently, we held a Alexa hackathon. I live here in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada, and we brought a whole bunch of people who had nothing to do with voice, but designers and developers and creatives, and young, smart people, to figure out what the future of voice would look like. So we gave them a little bit of a narrow, we gave them a couple different problems and a couple different use cases, not use cases, but they would have to come up with use cases. And, for the whole day, we had people, hacking away. Some people got to using storylines, some people didn't. The winning team actually came out with an idea. It's called My City, and it was essentially a way of getting your government services more quickly using voice. And we really thought, the judges really thought that it was a really great use case, because listen, most municipalities are always looking for money. They're always saying, how could we do more with less? And they came up with a way of actually accessing government information and services using voice. And they were starting with a really particular use case of people accessing their system a lot, which are contractors and builders who are always looking for permitting information. And so they started with that use case. So we're actually in the process of building out the proof of concept for them. That was the whole. Not only did they get like Amazon, Alexis, Echo Spots, but part of it was we actually going to build the thing for them so that they can put it out in the world and say, this is part of, this is something that we were part of, and if they become a $1 billion company, great. We just want to help. Move the ecosystem along, and that's why we did that. And we want to host more hackathons and just build the ecosystem. I think that's really, really important in terms of what we want to do is rise everybody up.
And tell us a little bit then about how you kind of. So I know that you've done a lot of speaking on this, a lot of evangelism kind of stuff on this, and it's obviously something that you're massively passionate about. And the hackathons and stuff like that is all these kind of events are really well attended and stuff. And then I've seen some of the stuff you put on Instagram and stuff like that. It looked like a really good kind of event. I'm kind of curious about how you then will kind of take either that example of that municipality kind of skill, or another example of another kind of voice project that you've worked on. What's the sort of process that you would go through to create this? I mean, you mentioned at the very beginning of the podcast the human-centered approach and stuff like that. I'm wondering if we can delve into some of the details in terms of how you would either take a product like that and kind of get it to a point where it's ready for market, if you like, or how you would approach the design and iteration of voice experiences in general.
Yeah. So I think there's two parts to that. It is really the design piece and the distribution piece. So let me start with the design piece and talk a little bit about, how we like to go about it. I think I'm not so naive to say that voice should be used everywhere, or there's going to be a billion use cases everywhere. Listen, there's going to be certain times where voice is more useful than others, and when it's repeatable, when there's a process that is a little bit more cumbersome that we can get through voice, these are really, really amazing use cases. So, one example is that we went to a government client and they want to understand how to use voice. They actually didn't know how to use voice or where to use voice. So I said, let's follow a number of your employees around for the day and discover where a voice could be really applicable. So for example, with one of the clients that we had, we actually got in this guy's truck. He's kind of like, he does field surveys. Okay. I actually think that's a really great idea, to not only follow people around at work, but also follow around people at home on the way to work. Maybe they're on site, just to understand the context of why they do what they do. And so with the field inspector, they would drive out to their particular location, collect the information that they needed, and they would go back into their vehicle and then type out all the information that they want to record into the system. They'd essentially do it twice, and sometimes they wouldn't be able to do it on site because it would be too cold. I live in Canada, so it's really cold in Canada, and so a lot of people who are outside, they don't want to be sticking out their phone, their iPad, their pen, and then doing that. And so, for example, in this specific use case, what we realized is that if we could really automate the process of entering the information in their car, not only would they have to go back to their office and now type out all this information, but they can actually do this more seamless. Back at the central office, they could get this information more quickly. They could make more real-time decisions because they would have the information at their fingertips. And that was the insight. Now, we weren't able to actually create the prototype in their car. I think there's actually been some new announcements that actually happened this week. This is why I get so. This is why there's always new announcements that are coming, and I'm going back to our clients and saying this actually came out, and now we can do this. So, we're trying to figure out a way to prototype that we can actually get more information. We can actually enter information from their car into their system in a seamless way. So that's just a very specific use case of literally following somebody around, understanding what they do and why they do it, and designing a use case for them. And of course, that starts the process of, okay, so starting small. I think minimal viable product is always good. How can we solve this tiny little problem with a small sprint and a small experiment, and seeing how we can move the needle. Now, once we actually get into development, I'm in Canada. They don't have Alexa for Business, so we've been doing a hackathon in order to create private skills for an organization, so that they can actually prototype this within the office. It's complicated, guys. Like, this is what, I wish I lived in the States because things would be a little bit easier. But Alexa has come out for Alexa for Business, where you can actually try out private skills, and rolling that out within an organization is still not seamless. So we've just been trying to do some, hackarounds to make that happen. But that's what we've been trying to do. From a distribution standpoint, for example, for the municipalities, I think what we would like to do is, for example, in that case, again, start with a very small problem, test with a very small use case of contractors and people who want to get permitting done, and then roll it up from there. I think a big bang approach will never work. I think, again, starting small teams, small sprints, small use cases, small groups of people testing it out is always the best way to go about it.
Yeah, Shawn, what I think I'm hearing in this talk is, between the avalanche of news, the starting small, get a small use case first, is that voice has grown so much over the past few years that you can no longer say, I build for voice. It really does necessitate focusing. You have to be, I build for voice for municipalities, or I'm a voice designer, I'm a voice developer. Would you say that's accurate?
You know what? I mean, you said that, it's been growing over the last, year. It's been growing over the last week. I think what's really important is the fact that it's growing so quickly is that you can't get so romantic about what your specific skill sets are. You have to work with other people that are, whether developers, they're subject matter experts. You actually have to work more within an ecosystem, as opposed to being a really great just a voice designer. I'll give you an example of this. We have one client that we're going to be starting work with. It's more of an experiment prototype standpoint, where they want to do voice assessments. Essentially, what they want to do is create somebody speaks a particular language, and we would be able to grade them based on their based on their grammar and their nuances through a voice device. It's a bit complicated. I don't really know how we're going to do it. I don't know how we're going to do it. But what we've done is we've actually partnered with a really smart team out of the University of Alberta, where they have people who are experts in artificial intelligence, in NLU. We have a design person who is really amazing at voice experiences. We have another person who is a data scientist. And so we're combining all these people together to answer this particular problem. And I think that's the best way of actually going about it, is getting people from different disciplines and to answer a particular challenge. And I think that's the way to go about future problems and understanding future use cases, is bringing those types of people together. I hope that answered the question. It's moving so quickly that I don't even know how to answer it, to be honest.
I think it sounds as though, I mean, from that example you just said, you're talking about, I think, Dustin, I think what you were kind of getting at is that, there is so much stuff that needs to be done, and so much kind of things that are announced, that actually you do need a multidisciplinary team to deliver this kind of stuff. And it's certainly, from that example you gave there, it sounds as though that's kind of the case.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say one more thing around this. I know Amazon's philosophy is they want to enable voice everywhere. They want it to be ubiquitous. They want you to be able to walk through a shopping mall, walk through your house, and be able to use voice everywhere. I think, just like, there was a number of years ago, I don't know if you remember, but a lot of people talked about Internet of Things, and that everything would have data attached to it. You would have a chair or a table, and you'd be able to get data out of it. I don't think that really happened, but there will be a time when you may be able to talk to your table, to your chair, to your glass of water. I think it's wild to think about, but this whole idea of voice everywhere will happen in some respect, and that's just going to open up the floodgates around possibilities and opportunities, and just thinking about the space in new ways. Just voice everywhere. I mean, everybody talked about data everywhere. I think voice everywhere I don't know when that will happen, like maybe in 20 years, but that might be a thing that I would literally talk to this Starbucks cup and say, how hot is this thing? Or, how much coffee do we have left? Like, it sounds wild, but might happen.
Yeah, I think that there's signs of, I know that Amazon are trying to get Alexa everywhere, and that's kind of, you've seen from the announcement the other week that it's, they're trying a lot of different things to try and get it in as many places as possible. And, I think that there's evidence as well there was a story last week about Marriott hotels rolling out Alexas in all of their hotel rooms. So it's kind of getting to the point where my kind of observations of what I was going to say in terms of one of the points you made earlier on was that in the UK particularly, there's some signs of development, some signs of things being launched, but there's a lot of people who are just interested. A lot of brands who are just interested. It's perked their interest. It's kind of, it's more of a consultancy space at the moment than it is necessarily a practical development space. But there are signs happening. You've mentioned a few things of the work that you've been doing, integrate with CRMs, and I know that Dustin, when we had Bob Stolzberg on, he was talking about a whole lot of enterprise projects that he's working on. You see Marriott hotels rolling out customer-facing, echoes and stuff like that. There's signs of it popping up in an increasing amount of places, isn't there? So I don't think it's probably it's a longer thing for it to get to the point where absolutely everything's voice enabled. But I mean, those announcements from Amazon last week it's not that far away, really.
No, totally. Listen, I know we're almost out of time here. And you guys talk to so many amazing people. What do you guys think the future of voice in the next 5 years looks like? Like, do you think that we're going to continue on this exponential scale? Do you think that, we're going to have voice everywhere? Like, do you think there's going to be $1 billion company? Like, in the next 5 years, where do you think this is going to go? Because you know what's going to happen in 5 years. I'm going to go back to this and go see if your predictions were right. So go ahead. I'd like to hear it.
Go on, Dustin. I'll let you take that one first, and then I'll chip in after.
Oh yeah, so you're going to take a little bit more time to think, Kane. Is that...
well, I did a talk about this last week, so I can go first if you want.
No, that's all good. I mean, it's hard to say. I think what we're going to see is the home certainly is going to be controlled more and more by voice. Everything that plugs in right now, you could conceivably think of as having some sort of voice input or voice output for sure. We're going to see a lot fewer keyboards, perhaps. We're going to really see them move towards voice as an input. And I think it's just going to be an everyday kind of thing, whether it's on mobile applications, whether it's in your headphones, wherever you are. I think people are going to get increasingly used to using voice as one of those modes. And it's just going to be something that you need. You're going to need a website, you're going to need a mobile presence, and you're going to need voice.
My observations is that I completely agree with that, and I think that there's a scale. So there's a scale of usership, I suppose. You've got light users, medium users, and heavy users. So we've got heavy users now. You know, there are heavy users out there who are using more advanced functionality. The most advanced that these are able to offer at the moment, things like booking trains, things like, you know, checking calendars and doing the kind of the functionality bits, setting reminders, doing to-do lists, shopping lists, buying stuff. That's kind of like the heavy usership stuff. So on one hand, I think that what you're going to be able to do in terms of capability is going to increase. And not only are you going to be able to just book one single fare train ticket, but you'll probably be able to do a hell of a lot more, you know, reserving seats and, you know, getting discounts and using rail cards and et cetera, just more functions in general. But if you think about 5 years isn't a very long time, so you've got people now who don't use voice whatsoever. So you're probably talking that there's still going to be people coming on stream, if you like, probably still after 5 years. And as we kind of go through the 5 years, the people who are getting, you know, echoes for Christmas this year, they're probably going to be a decent proportion of them might well be light users for the next year. You know, I got an Echo a while back. I use it quite a lot, but I've noticed using other assistants more as well. So it's kind of my overall usership is enhanced. But I'm probably myself not necessarily a heavy user. Some cases I am, some cases I'm not. So I think that on the one hand, you're going to see more heavy users, obviously, that are going to require or expect more functionality, so that the whole platform, the whole ecosystem is going to need to be able to provide the ability to be able to handle more complex situations. I think the multimodal thing is another sort of situation. Broadly speaking, in general, I think that in terms of the actual adoption, you know, you were saying, is it going to tail off or whatever? I think that it's going to completely continue to skyrocket, in my opinion. Because it's the first technology ever that's been able to target kids, adults, and older people, and you don't have to train them on how to use it at all. You know, you've got essentially the entire population from when you can start speaking to when you pop your clogs, and the vast majority of them aren't aware of it. But every single person who can speak, and even people that can't necessarily speak due to things like voice that will probably roll out, which helps people with speech impairment speak, it can reach absolutely everybody. So I think that, broadly speaking, on a bigger picture thing, it's just going to be a case of adoption and increasing functionality for those heavy users, I reckon.
Okay, well, I love those. I love those predictions. I'll just do one very simply. In the next 5 years, there's going to be one company that will come up that now everybody will start to use, and it will be on. You can get it on Google Assistant. You can get it on Amazon Alexa or whatever. That one company will open up the floodgates to everybody else. To be honest with you, there's not that we don't have that one company. We don't have that one app. That game-changing thing has not happened yet. That company will be $1 billion company, and it will create the ecosystem around it. And that's going to happen, and it's going to happen in the next 5 years, and can't wait to see that.
Wicked. Well, I'll set my reminder. Alexa, set me a reminder for 5 years' time.
Yeah.
And we'll do this again. Shawn, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Really, really enjoyed that conversation. Tell people where they can get in touch with you or follow the work that you're doing with Silver, or reach out to you in Silver if they're interested in working with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best thing to do is you can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm at Shawn Kanungo. You can find us on Insta and Twitter at Silver Drip Voice. And I think the best thing that you can do is, before you find me, is please subscribe. Leave a rating and review for these guys. They're working their asses off, and they would really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Shawn, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
That was Shawn Kanungo of Silver. Really, really interesting guy, Shawn. Super passionate guy. I love the energy he brought to the podcast, and I love, his insights and his experience and some of the stories he's been telling. It's really, really interesting stuff. On the enterprise side, it seems and it feels like early days, but again, on the consumer side, it also sometimes feels like early days as well. So I think that now is the time for, as Shawn was saying, experimenting, prototyping, finding some use cases, making voice and trying to weave voice into a core part of your digital transformation strategy as one of the tools that you use amongst others. So I definitely think now is the time for trying, now is the time for experimenting, and with the rest of the community, with the rest of the industry, we're all learning and we're all trying to push the envelope forward, and Shawn and Silver are doing a fantastic job. I will say, follow Silver on Instagram. That is the one thing I would absolutely say. If you're not in a position to reach out to them for work, and if you're not kind of involved in the enterprise side, at least follow Silver on Instagram and Shawn, because he's a really, really good speaker. They post clips and inspirational kind of stories about voice all the time. So do that. Do that. Thank you, Shawn, again for joining us. Thank you, Dustin, as well, for co-hosting. And as ever, boys and girls, thank you all for listening. Until next time, see you later.